Tovim. So the idea of a perfect world has been imagined by people throughout the ages. Familiar to us are the imaginations of authors of fantasy and dystopia. In one of my favorite young adult novels, The Giver, we read about what it would be like to live in a world without memory of war, fear, and persecution. All disorder became harmony. Yet their futuristic world also lacks love, emotion, music, and memories. The protagonist, Jonas, receives through The Giver a glimpse of the past world, our world, the one we live in today. He describes what it looked like. There could be colors and grandparents, he says, reminiscing on ideas and emotions missing and stolen from his utopia. Would the futuristic world of The Giver be similar to the world we are seeking to build and to find? Would people be the same or equal? Would there still be fear or hatred? We are all familiar with groups of Jews in Jerusalem who cry out, Moshiach, Moshiach, Moshiach. We must follow all the halakha as Moshiach will arrive soon, they say. We as Reformed Jews still imagine, and many of us pray for, a messianic age. Yet, we tend to reject the idea that the physical Moshiach is going to come down and save us. We don't pray for the rebuilding of the temple or to continue with the kind of sacrifices that we read about in this week's portion of Vayikra. Instead, we are taught throughout our lives, Tikkun Olam, repair the world. We focus our energy on acting and doing. When something seems far away, or at a time undetermined, it gives you the ability to focus more solely on the present, rather than dwelling on our past with the temple and practice of sacrifice, as we see in the Torah we read this Shabbat. What I began questioning is when we say we are building our world, what exactly are we as Reformed Jews working towards? If not for a Messiah, or for a utopia, or for another temple, then for what? What does it mean when we read in this week's portion of Vayikra that Kohanim and the animals they sacrificed were required to be free of blemish as they stood in the place considered closest to God? What makes a world and its people and animals perfect? While I don't have the answers to all these questions, I've decided to start to explore the idea of perfection, starting at a small part of the wider world, yet certainly complex, the human species. I've decided to explore one view of what human perfection and lack of blemish may have actually looked like at the time of the Beit HaMikdash, and how Kohanim interacted with their community. Our chapter of Vayikra this week teaches us that if an anointed priest has incurred guilt, then from chapter 4 verse 3 in Leviticus, I quote, blame also falls upon the people, and he shall offer upon the altar for the sin which he is guilty, a bull without blemish as a sin offering to the Lord. When a priest makes an error, it is also the responsibility of the community. I think of this concept a bit like a game of soccer. When your opponents make a goal, it's the greater responsibility of the team and not just of the goalie. I question why priests were required to have been more perfect than the rest of the community. When I think about their requirement of physical perfection, I think also about physical disability. Was it due to stigma against people with physical disabilities that they were unable to perform the jobs of the high priest? Even high priests who are required to be free of physical blemish made mistakes and used sacrifice as a way to make amends, as we read this week. Judith Abrams, in her book Judaism and Disability, explains that the Kohanim needed to be physically perfect because when they recited the priestly blessing or made a sacrifice, that a deformity could distract the people or themselves from what they were doing. The priestly ideas about blemishes and disabilities were also extended to include everyone, regardless of their lineage, people who are accepted or not to different tasks according to their ability. To me, it seems it was how society viewed disability and the stigma that would cause people to stare and feel distracted from prayer and sacrifice, making it so that the priest had to be free of blemish when performing such tasks. Disability then and now wasn't only an identity, but a relationship to modes of production. Both biblical and modern society offer an openness to accepting people according to their abilities, but that openness is not without an end and not without problematic ideas. Today, too, stigma causes a separation between people with and without visible and invisible disabilities. Separate but unequal classrooms and schools for people with disabilities still exist, and there's often also discrimination in the workplace. We value people for what they believe to be their productivity. I would argue that there is no such thing as a perfect, free of blemish body, as each body is unique and created in God's image. Think about how difficult it would be to find an animal without blemish. If not physically disabled today, we all become disabled as we grow into old age. What would our future world look like if blemishes no longer exist? Would people live forever? I view the future as more accepting of disability, where people with disabilities perform equal roles in society, but both our present and our past do not always grant that. I want to bring us back to the question of what a world without chaos would look like in the future. Disability is part of the diversity of our world, and it's also a quality of an imperfect world. If diversity did not exist as it had in the giver, disability and ability might no longer be a way to assess production. I question, was Jonas of the Giver something of a high priest, having access to knowledge of a past world that nobody else had? Perhaps not. In his case, in a future perfect world without chaos, it is his gift of knowing imperfection that allows him to see the beauty and the memories of the past. We too have the gift of memory, as our past is written down for centuries in our Torah. Perhaps the Kohanim needed a gift of imperfection in their daily lives. They needed to repair their world and their community when faced with a sin and mistake, and they had an opportunity to make amends. Was it really perfection and lack of blemish, or was it their knowledge of imperfection and high responsibility to their community that allowed priests to have access to the highest duties closest to God? I believe it may be the latter, but the answer is probably not so simple. Whether we are praying for a rebuilding of a temple, for the Messiah to save us, or praying for a messianic age, or simply acting and doing and repairing our world, we as Jewish people have a responsibility to fix our mistakes, to care and be responsible for one another and for others. Whatever our motivation is, we need to remember that no matter how judged we are by society for our ability and productivity, that no human being is perfect, and that even in the future, even if we did have a temple or a messianic age one day, that perfection may not be the key to being close to God. I believe it is the gift of memory and imperfection, and how we deal with that imperfection and our knowledge, that will bring our people closer and closer to a holy, just, and sanctified world. So I am Toby.
So I am Tovim Yashir.